All right, you guys, this is Dr. Logan, and this video is the first set of videos that I'll provide for you guys for the test and measurements class. And this set of video is on basic math rules. So I'm going to do some instruction here with you guys. And it is on basic math rules. And to start, I thought what we would do is we would go into some of the basics around mathematical concepts you're going to need to know to be able to do a good job with the statistics involved in psychometrics. Okay. All right. So to start with, one of the things we need to discuss is the issue of positive and negative numbers and some of the rules around positive and negative numbers. One of the things you'll remember from math classes, I'm sure, is the idea that if you have a number by itself, like say this 2, this is actually a positive number, something to remember. Positive numbers are numbers we use all the time. And the same thing goes with if you see variables written, like say the variable x, that is actually a positive x. And it's kind of presumed. And basically, if you don't see a sign associated with a number or variable, you're to assume it's a positive value. Okay. Let's see. The other thing is negative numbers, of course, are written with a negative sign in front of it. So a negative number, instead of it being written as a 2, if it's a negative 2, then it's going to look like a minus 2. And same thing with an x. It's a minus x. And so that's how you can tell the difference. Numbers with no signs is a positive. Numbers with a sign are going to be a negative value. Okay. Now, the second part of this has to do with how we deal with mathematical operations associated with negative numbers. So the second part of it is this, that if we're going to add or subtract numbers with signs, then there are rules we have to follow, and they're pretty easy as long as you can kind of memorize the ones that are a little more confusing. But for adding and subtracting, it's pretty basic. So if you're adding positive numbers, say 3 plus 4, those are both positive numbers, like we just said a little bit over here. A 2 by itself is a positive 2. So a 3 by itself here is a positive 3, and a 4 by itself is a positive 4. That's going to be 3 plus 4, and that equals 7. And of course, that is technically a positive number, positive 7. All right. Now with subtraction, if we had 3 minus 4, this is where it gets a little more difficult because we're subtracting a value larger than the number that we're subtracting it from. And of course, that's where we get into negative and positive values, which you'll have a lot in statistics and research and tests and measurements. So the way you deal with that is you basically turn the subtraction into a positive and you change the sign of the number next to it. Now you have a negative number being added to a positive number. And the rule there is that it's the sign of the largest number That's the first part. You take the sign of the largest number and then you subtract the numbers from each other. So the sign of the largest number is a negative value. So since 4 is larger than 3, the sign, the result is going to be a negative sign. And then you subtract 3 from 4, so that ends up being a minus 1. So negative 1 is the correct answer for 3 minus 4. It's a negative value. So these are the rules for subtracting or adding numbers where you have numbers with different values, okay? All right, so that's add and subtract. Now let's talk about multiply. Multiplication and division. They have similar rules involved with these guys, but it's a little bit different. So when multiplying and dividing two numbers with the same sign, the answer is always going to be positive. So you know, a positive 3 times a positive 4. And by the way, that dot here in the middle, that's the same thing as multiply. We use dots so you won't mix up the x involved with multiplication, the multiplication sign with the variable x. So 3 times, positive 3 times a positive 4 is going to be a positive 12. So a positive times a positive is a positive. And then it's the same thing. Hold on 1 second. Make some space here. It's the same thing with negatives. So a negative 3 times a negative 4, that's also going to be a positive 12. So a positive times a positive is a positive, and a negative times a negative is a positive. Now, when you get into, when you have multiple signs, so a negative value, say 3 times a positive value, or even the other way around, positive 3 times a negative 4, a negative times a positive, as you know, is always going to be negative. So negative 3 times a negative 4 is a negative 12, and a 3 times a negative 4 is also a negative 12. So those are the rules. The addition and subtraction rules are here. Sign of the largest number, and then subtract the two from each other. And then the rules for multiplication is same sign is a positive, opposite sign is always a negative. And it's the same thing for division as well. All right, so that's the end of this one. What we'll go on to in the next tutorial is we'll start talking a little bit about decimals and percents.